Hello folks, thanks for joining me. I don't know about you, but it is definitely starting to tail off with the warmth now. It's starting to get a little bit colder. And as it gets colder and colder and deeper into winter, you will need your winter gloves. It's sad, but we are probably at that stage now. And you may even need heated gloves if you want that next level of comfort whilst you're riding in the colder temperatures, which is why we have these here for you today. These are the Merlin Minworth Heritage Heated Glove. That is a mouthful. Heritage. These are classically styled. They are very simply styled, at least. The heated element, obvious, it is a heated glove. It has a battery pack. It has a heating filament across the back of your hand, which I'll get onto in a few moments. Firstly though, I should probably explain their credentials just as a winter glove before we get on to the heating, because that is important. You can't really separate the two. If, for example, you're out and you haven't charged the battery, maybe you've forgotten, or it's a longer ride and the battery won't last for the full ride, then you're going to need to know that these will stand up just as a regular pair of winter gloves, and of course they do. We have them in either a men's version or a women's version if you go for the black. We also have a brown and a dark brown. All of these come in at £199.98 and are CE approved, obviously. As a winter glove then, they are bigger, obviously. They need to be insulated. They aren't uncomfortably big, but I'm going to assume if you're looking at something like this, you're probably commuting, because if you were out pleasure riding, you wouldn't go out when it was that cold. Why would you? And if you are commuting, then you've got the heating in there, but you also need these to be waterproof, which of course they are. You have a Hypora waterproof membrane from Merlin, which is very reliable. I can attest to that. I have it in my boots. It still works really nicely. We have cowhide leather on the outside. That's nice and soft, nice and supple the moment you get them on. You have this accordion stretch leather over your knuckles for a bit more flexibility, but the details again are going to be pretty simple and clean across these. There aren't really that many accents other than the Merlin badge, which is on the power switch on the bottom there, which I'll get onto in a few moments. You've got the Merlin logo as well on your index finger. You have something for touchscreen on your finger as well. And then you've got some armor on your palm, some soft armor on your palm, and you've got D3O in your knuckles, which is quite extensive. It goes quite far over the back of your hand. I'm going to assume that's also in aid of blocking out some of the colder temperatures, but nice and thick, obviously nice and flexible, so it's not uncomfortable at all. You have a fleece liner on the inside, which is nice and soft, and then you've got Thinsulate for your insulation. You have 200 gram on the back and you have 100 gram on the palm. When I say that, it doesn't mean the gloves are ridiculously heavy, as that might suggest. What they do is basically measure it per square meter. So it's 200 grams per square meter. It basically just means that it's slightly thicker and obviously warmer on the back, which is important because that's the bit that's exposed to this coldest air. And on the palm, a little bit lighter so that you can still have nice dexterous control over your handlebars. As a winter glove then, they are thick enough to keep them warm, not so thick as to be uncomfortable, and they're waterproof. Then of course we have the heating. So let's start with the battery, which I have here. This is a 22,000 milliamp hour battery. Now you could get bigger and it would give you a longer battery life, but there comes a fine line or a fine point where it's ludicrously big and it's uncomfortable or just too conspicuous. It gets in the way, it doesn't work quite as well. I would say this is the perfect size if you are going to be using these for shorter trips and commuting. They say with this on the medium setting, and it has three, so you've got a first setting, middle setting, top setting obviously for the hottest, but on the middle setting it will give you 3.5 hours of life approximately. I don't know about your commute, but for me that's absolutely fine to get me into work and back home easily. Even if I put it on the hotter setting, I think I'd be fine. But if I need to charge it up, I can charge it when I get to work. It's got a USB charger, which you connect both these batteries up with. They also say if you are leaving this for storage, mainly in the summer when you're not going to use these as much, to leave them with about 75% charge. You don't have to be too meticulous about that, but just make sure they've got some charge on there. Don't leave them stone flat, otherwise you might shorten their life. In terms of the heat, I will try them on while I explain it to you. In fact, let's just unfasten that. Should also say it's a longer gauntlet or a longer cuff on this, designed to go over the top of your sleeve. You will need to take into consideration the battery being in there. It does make it slightly bigger. So when it comes to the sizing, I would probably recommend going up a size just to make sure you have the room that you need. Any bigger and it might be a little bit too loose, to be honest with you, so I think they've got that balance pretty well. But you undo it using the Velcro. You can see the pouch that's in there. If I just pull out the cable, you will see it also has this cap on the top. It's important that I reiterate these are waterproof, so in terms of your electronics, you have no issue there. Don't worry too much about the conditions you're riding in. If it is the colder months, then it's likely to be wet, so you don't have to worry about that too much. You take off this cap, and that's something I will pull them up on. It's a very small cap. It's not attached anywhere. I can see that going wandering at some point whilst you're on these. It won't affect the usage of it at all, but it will be a shame if you do lose that, so just keep an eye on it is my best advice. Maybe leave it at home in the miscellaneous drawer that everyone has in their own house. But when you connect that back up, you can fit this in. You fit it widthways, not lengthways. You could theoretically fit it in the pouch lengthways, but you'll start to feel it on the heel of your palm if you do that. So you're supposed to put it widthways in there, fasten it up, and then of course I can put the gloves on and I can explain that, and it does seem like a small distinction or maybe not that important, but the fact that it is on the underside of your wrist, for me, is a huge plus, a huge benefit. I've had heated stuff in the past, and some of the things I've had in the past, some of the gloves I've had in the past, have had the battery on the back of your wrist, which I don't like for a number of different reasons. One, it's quite large. Two, the weight draws it onto your wrist so you can feel it the whole time you're riding, which is kind of irritating. Three, from a safety standpoint, if I were to come off, I don't like the idea of having something that big and heavy on the back of my wrists. They're fairly delicate if you were to come off, so you don't want any extra weight or anything hitting or impacting the back of your hand. And if you think about the way that you actually use your hands when you're on the bike, you're more likely to bend your hand that way when you're using the throttle, for example, with your right hand. But if you bend your hand backwards, then it comes into contact with the battery and it just adds some pressure in there and it doesn't really work that well. Whereas the underside of your wrist, as this one is found, is a much more sensible placement in my opinion. The other thing I should probably mention is how warm these actually get. So if I put it on the hottest setting, basically you press it once, it goes to the hottest, then you can go to the middle setting and then the coldest setting and then off if you don't need it. But what I would recommend if you're out riding is prevention is often what I've found works best. So I tend to just stick them on the moment I get out riding, rather than let my hands get cold and then just turn it on once they're cold, and then you have to reheat your hands effectively. I'd rather just maintain a comfortable temperature across the whole of my hand. It also makes it safer, obviously, if your hands are warmer, they'll move and react a lot quicker than if they're cold. Now, on the hottest setting, we are in a studio, I am stationary, it's quite warm in here anyway. Obviously, I can feel this taking effect. I can feel that it is reasonably warm. And I should explain that it goes across the back of your hand and down your fingers as well. If you just press on them, you'll feel it against your skin. It doesn't get dangerously hot. It doesn't get uncomfortably hot at all. What's more likely to happen is when you're stationary and static as I am, you will feel it on. If you get moving, and especially if you get moving at higher speeds, it will start to get a little bit colder. You'll still feel it roughly in the background, but it won't feel quite as warm. All it's really doing at that stage, especially if you're moving faster than say 40 miles an hour, as I've found, then it becomes more of a heat shield. So it just blocks out the cold air rather than actively heating your hands, if that makes sense. But if we think about the application and what people are likely to do with these, if you are going touring, it's worth pointing out as well that you can't connect it to your bike, so you can't charge on the go. The battery you have is the battery you have, and as I say, it lasts for about 3.5 hours. So if you're doing a really long trip, there is a chance it might not last you the full journey, whereas if you're commuting, I'd find it very unlikely to be commuting for longer than you would need these on. And if I just press that a few more times, I can turn it off and take these off before my hand overheats slightly in the studio. So trying them on before, what I would say is that they weren't that warm and I was wondering when it was going to kick in. They take a bit of time to warm up, but honestly, that's a nice comfortable warmth you've got in there, and you will feel that when you're commuting. With the sizing, of course, as always, I'll say we have that size guide on our website, which will tell me that for a size 9 hand, I need the extra large. I've found, or we found in the office, that these are about a half size smaller than you might well expect. I would go for the extra large anyway. I can fit in the large, but when it comes to fitting that over my sleeves with the battery pack as well, Obviously, it would be nicer to go for the larger size, but when I tend to go for my winter clothing, I tend to size up ever so slightly anyway to allow for a bit of extra room and allow for a pocket of air around my body or around my hands, whatever the case may be, just to circulate that air a bit better and insulate slightly better as well. We will have the links in the description, as we do always. Drop your questions and comments if you have any, and for more of the world's finest riding gear, stay tuned to Urban Rider. Thank you.